Hey folks, welcome to Deep Dive Dispatch, the podcast where we don't just scratch the surface. We dig deep into the political landscapes that shape our world today. I'm excited to introduce your guides on this journey through history and headlines, John Matthews and his insightful co-host, Sarah Collins. Together, they'll peel back the layers of complex political issues, offering a slightly conservative viewpoint while staying rooted in facts and historical context. So, buckle up for a thought-provoking ride as we dive into the stories behind the stories. This is Deep Dive Dispatch. Let's get started.
All right, folks, buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into a topic that's sure to make some waves: birthright citizenship.
Oh yeah, this one's a hot potato.
You can say that again? Specifically, we're looking at former President Trump's proposal, the one where he wanted to end birthright citizenship for kids, children of undocumented immigrants, and really put the brakes on what's often called birth tourism.
Yeah, that whole idea really stirred the pot, didn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, this issue gets people riled up on both sides, so we're going to try to carefully unpack it all.
It sounds like a plan. It's fascinating, though, isn't it?
What is?
How this whole debate really boils down to how we interpret just one tiny phrase in the 14th Amendment.
Oh, you mean subject to the jurisdiction thereof?
That's the one. 5 little words, but man, they carry a ton of weight legally and politically. It's amazing.
You're not kidding. And, we toss around the term birthright citizenship all the time, but I think it's worth taking a minute to really define what we mean. So basically, it means that if you're born on U.S. soil, boom, you're automatically a U.S. citizen. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Straightforward as that.
Exactly. And this approach is different from what a lot of other countries do, right?
Oh, absolutely. Many countries go by what's called jus sanguinis, which sounds super fancy, but just means your citizenship depends on your parents' nationality, not your birthplace.
So where you're born doesn't automatically make you a citizen in those places?
No, not at all.
Interesting. So in this deep dive, we're going to take a journey to understand how birthright citizenship works in the U.S., see how it stacks up against what other countries do, and explore the arguments for and against it.
All the good stuff.
Right. And I think it's important to note that we'll be paying particular attention to the conservative perspective on this issue.
Definitely, especially since there's a conservative president who really pushed this into the spotlight.
Okay, so let's start with the source of it all, the 14th Amendment. The Citizenship Clause states, and I'll quote it here, "All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States." Seems pretty clear-cut at first glance, right?
It does, doesn't it?
But there's always a but, isn't there?
Pretty much. It's that phrase we talked about earlier, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, that's causing all the ruckus.
I figured as much.
To really understand the debate we're having today, we need to hop into a time machine and zoom back to 1868. That's when the 14th Amendment was ratified, right after the Civil War.
A pretty tumultuous time in American history.
You bet. And the main goal back then was to make sure formerly enslaved people were guaranteed citizenship. It was a huge step towards equality and enfranchisement.
Right, so how does all that historical context tie into the debate about children of non-citizens today? It seems like a bit of a leap.
Well, that's where the legal arguments get really interesting. See, some legal scholars look at that phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, and argue that it applies to anyone born on U.S. soil, period.
Regardless of their parents' immigration status.
Exactly. They point to the broad language used in the amendment and its historical purpose of inclusion. They say it was meant to be sweeping.
So basically, they're saying the 14th Amendment meant to cover everyone born in the U.S., no exceptions.
That's their argument, yep.
Makes sense. But I'm guessing not everyone agrees with that interpretation.
You guessed right. Those who want to limit birthright citizenship read that same phrase much more narrowly. Their argument is that the people who wrote the 14th Amendment couldn't have predicted the scale of undocumented immigration we have today.
So they're saying the original intent of the amendment doesn't really apply to the children of people who are here illegally.
Precisely. It's all about interpreting the original intent through the lens of modern issues, like undocumented immigration. It really makes you realize just how much weight those words from centuries ago still carry today.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to apply a rule book from a different era to a whole new game.
It is. And to make things even more complicated, the U.S. is actually kind of unusual when it comes to offering unrestricted birthright citizenship.
Really? I would have thought it was more common.
Nope, not really. Only 33 countries, plus a couple of territories, have it. Most other countries, like a lot of Europe, follow that just sanguineous idea we were talking about.
So, like in France or Germany, a child born there might need one of their parents to be a legal resident to automatically become a citizen themselves.
Exactly. It shows you there's a whole spectrum of approaches to this globally.
Wow, I had no idea. That really puts the U.S. system in a new light. And it kind of sets the stage for why former President Trump pushed so hard for change, Ray.
You're hitting the nail on the head.
He was super vocal about wanting to end birthright citizenship for kids of undocumented immigrants and crack down on birth tourism.
He was. And he didn't mince words about his reasoning either.
Like what?
Well, his argument was that giving automatic citizenship to children born to undocumented immigrants basically encourages more people to come here illegally.
Because their kids will be citizens, right?
Exactly. He saw it as a magnet pulling people in. He also said it puts a strain on government resources and that it's just plain unfair to folks who immigrate here legally.
Those are pretty strong points.
Yeah.
Did he ever say anything directly about this?
He did. He even said, and I quote, "My policy will choke off a major incentive for continued illegal immigration, deter more migrants from coming, and encourage many of the aliens Joe Biden has unlawfully let into our country to go back to their home countries."
Wow, he definitely didn't hold back.
Nope. He framed this as a matter of national security and fairness, plain and simple.
I see. So he was appealing to those who believe that birthright citizenship, as it stands, undermines the rule of law.
Exactly. The conservative perspective is that it incentivizes people to break the rules, to enter the country illegally just to get a foothold for their kids. They see it as a loophole that needs to be closed.
Okay, I'm starting to get the full picture now. And this all ties into that whole birth tourism phenomenon, right?
It does. And there was actually a whole Senate report on that, remember?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Wasn't it from the Senate Committee on Homeland Security?
You got it. The title was Birth Tourism in the United States, and it really shines a light on this whole industry that's popped up.
So it's more organized than just individual cases.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about companies that cater specifically to pregnant women, mostly from China and Russia, who travel to the U.S. just to give birth.
Wow, so their kids will automatically become U.S. citizens.
Yep. The report even names companies like Ada International and Miami Mama that offer these elaborate packages that can cost up to $38,000.
$38,000
Yeah.
for a birth tourism package.
You heard that right. They cover everything, from helping with visas and finding housing to arranging medical care and even legal consultations.
It sounds like a whole system designed to, well, I guess, take advantage of the current understanding of birthright citizenship.
You could say that.
Okay, so back to Trump's proposal for a sec. Is it even legal for a president to try and end birthright citizenship with just an executive order? Wouldn't that go against the 14th Amendment?
That is the million-dollar question, and it gets to the heart of the whole debate about how much power a president really has.
Right, because we've seen presidents try to use executive orders to change things related to immigration before, and it hasn't always gone smoothly.
Not at all. There have been a ton of legal challenges. Remember things like the Alien and Sedition Acts way back when, or Roosevelt putting Japanese Americans in internment camp?
Oh yeah, those were super controversial and ultimately challenged in court.
Exactly. And even more recently, Trump's own Muslim ban faced a ton of pushback and lawsuits.
So it seems like presidents trying to use executive orders in immigration matters is always a recipe for a legal battle.
Pretty much. It brings up a lot of questions about how executive power interacts with things like judicial review and legal precedent.
Right. And then you have that Supreme Court case, U.S. v. Wong Kim Ark, which upheld birthright citizenship for children of legal residents.
Another big precedent to consider.
It seems like, legally speaking, this executive order would be stepping into some pretty murky waters.
It would, no doubt. Trying to change how the 14th Amendment has been interpreted for so long would be a huge deal. And it would almost certainly trigger a legal fight that could end up redefining what American citizenship even means.
Wow, this is getting really complex.
Yeah.
We've got the 14th Amendment, legal precedents, executive power, and birth tourism all tangled up together. Where do we even go from here?
Well, let's try to untangle those legal arguments a bit more and see what a potential court challenge might look like. All right, so let's imagine this whole thing going to court.
Ooh, like a Supreme Court showdown.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
the kind of high-stakes legal battle we'd be looking at. And whatever they decide would have a huge impact. It would be a landmark decision, for sure.
No doubt. So on one side, you'd have folks defending Trump's executive order.
Right. And they probably argue that the 14th Amendment was never intended to grant automatic citizenship to children of undocumented immigrants.
I can see that argument.
Yeah, they'd likely point back to the historical context, saying illegal immigration, as we know it today, just wasn't a thing back then.
So their argument is that the people who wrote the 14th Amendment couldn't have possibly foreseen this situation.
Exactly. And they might also emphasize the strain on things like social services and the potential for fraud.
I could see how those would be major concerns for them.
Right. And they'd probably also argue that birthright citizenship actually makes the problem worse because it encourages people to come here illegally.
Because they know their kids would be citizens,
Yeah.
right?
They see it as undermining the rule of law.
Okay, I'm following you. But what about the other side of the argument? What would the folks challenging the executive order say?
Well, they probably come out swinging, saying the 14th Amendment is crystal clear. Anyone born on U.S. soil is a citizen, period.
It seems pretty straightforward when you put it like that.
Right. And they'd probably bring up cases like U.S. v. Wong Kim Ark. You know, that Supreme Court decision from 1898 that affirmed birthright citizenship for children of legal residents.
Oh, right. Didn't that case deal with some similar questions about excluding certain groups from citizenship?
It did. It shows that these debates about who gets to be a citizen have been going on for a long time.
It's like history repeating itself.
Exactly. And those opposing the executive order would also likely argue that it's a massive overreach of presidential power.
So they'd say that changing something as fundamental as birthright citizenship requires an act of Congress, not just a presidential order.
Right. They'd say it needs to go through the proper legislative process.
That makes sense. It's like a checks and balances issue, right? Making sure one branch of government doesn't have too much power.
Exactly. It's a classic constitutional law debate. And this hypothetical case, if it ever went to court, would have huge implications. It could completely reshape immigration law and redefine what it means to be an American citizen for generations to come.
Talk about high stakes. It's not just about legal arguments, though, is it?
Yeah.
What about the bigger picture, the social and ethical implications of this whole debate?
You're right. It goes much deeper than that. It really makes us examine our values as a nation.
What do you mean?
Well, on the one hand, we have this ideal of America as a land of opportunity, a place where anyone, regardless of their background, can build a life.
The whole melting pot idea, right?
Exactly. But then you have these concerns about fairness, about whether the system is being gamed, about the strain on resources. It's a balancing act, for sure.
It's like trying to reconcile those ideals with the realities of immigration in the 21st century.
It is, and it's tough. And then on top of all that, you have the whole birth tourism issue.
Right. That adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it?
Definitely. On one hand, you have folks who see it as taking advantage of a legal loophole.
Especially if that loophole wasn't really intended in the first place.
Right. They see it as unfair to those who immigrate here through the proper channels.
I can understand that perspective.
They argue it undermines the whole concept of citizenship. But then there's the other side of the coin, those who say, hey, if it's legal, people are within their rights to do it.
It becomes a question of individual rights versus what's seen as the best thing for society as a whole.
Precisely. And some might even say that all the focus on birth tourism is just a distraction.
A distraction from what?
From the bigger problems with immigration, the need for comprehensive reform. They might even say it's a way to target certain groups, like people from Asian countries, and that plays into existing xenophobia.
It's a sensitive issue, for sure. So where does all this leave us? Is ending birthright citizenship the solution? Or are there other ways to address these concerns?
That's the million-dollar question. And honestly, there's no easy answer. It's complicated. You have to weigh the legal, the social, and the economic consequences.
We need a solution that's fair, that follows the rule of law, and that recognizes just how complex immigration has become in the 21st century.
Well said. We need a nuanced approach. It's not just about picking a side. It's about understanding all the different facets of the issue.
It feels like we've only scratched the surface here. There's just so much to unpack.
There is, and that's what makes it so interesting. It forces us to think critically, to engage with different perspectives, and to really grapple with these fundamental questions about what it means to be an American in today's world. So where does this all leave us? Birthright citizenship, should it stay or should it go?
It's a tough one. We've really dug into the history, the legal arguments, the whole ethical debate. It's clear this issue isn't going away anytime soon.
Not a chance. And it's not just about laws and court cases, you know.
What do you mean?
It's about who we are as a country. What do we really value? It's amazing when you think about it, this concept of citizenship.
What do you find amazing about it?
It's like this invisible bond, you know?
Yeah.
Connects us to a country. No kidding. But we can't just ignore them, can we? And I think this deep dive has shown us that there are no easy answers here.
Yeah, it's not a simple yes or no situation.
Not at all. It's complex. You have to consider the historical context, the legal precedents, what the impact would be on society and the economy, the ethical side of it all. It's a lot.
It sounds like we need to move beyond just slogans and talking points
Yeah.
and really engage in some thoughtful conversations if we want to find solutions that actually work.
Couldn't agree more. And that's where you come in, dear listener.
What do you mean?
We've given you the info, the different perspectives, shown you just how complicated this issue is. Now it's your turn to keep the conversation going.
I like that. What can our listeners do?
Read the sources we talked about, do some more research, talk to your friends, family, really challenge your own assumptions.
Because ultimately this affects all of us, right?
It does. The future of birthright citizenship is going to shape what America looks like for generations to come. And the decisions we make now, whether we actively participate or not, they'll have a lasting impact.
So let's make those decisions with our eyes wide open, with all the information we can get, and with compassion for everyone involved.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So folks, this deep dive may be ending, but the conversation, the thinking, the learning, that needs to continue. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those dialogues going.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive Dispatch. We hope you found today's episode enlightening and packed full of insight. Remember, your support keeps us diving deep into the stories that matter. So if you enjoyed the show, make sure to download and share it with others who crave a deeper understanding of politics and history. And don't forget, we want to hear from you. If there's a topic out there that you think deserves a deep dive, reach out and let us know. Your input helps us bring you the most compelling content week after week. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll catch you next time on Deep Dive Dispatch. Keep exploring, folks.